like, well, what? Thought these episodes were only an hour long. Apparently that one was like an hour and something else.
It's all right.
Well, I just didn't want this to run over so late.
It's fine. What, do you work tomorrow morning?
Yeah.
Do you really?
Yeah, I do.
Oh my goodness, that's messed up.
It's Friday tomorrow.
Yeah, but it's like Christmas Eve. I don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah. Do you work tomorrow?
No, sir.
That's not right. I mean, that is nice of you. That is very nice. For you. Good for you.
Good for you.
Hopefully it's not very busy at all tomorrow.
Yeah, hopefully not. I mean, not for you. I mean, for fucking front lane, it's gonna be garbage.
Yeah. Whatever.
Whatever, dog.
Anyway.
Joseph.
Season 2.
Joseph.
What?
I was gonna ask you how many episodes you got through.
Just one. That was it. That was the first one. Actually, like I said, I'm not even done with it because there's like another 5 fucking minutes left of it. Yeah. It's really good. It's really good. It's really good. I was surprised that not really a spoiler. They mentioned the Wild Hunt in it.
Oh shit!
Which wasn't a thing in the books. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with that.
It's true.
Whether they actually go somewhere, because the Wild Hunt was just a myth, essentially. Like I said, they never went over it in the books.
Yeah.
It was just the third Witcher game.
2.5, 2 1/3.
2.5. So yeah, it'll be interesting if it's just a myth that they're like just an Easter egg they're referencing in the show, or if it is going to actually lead somewhere.
Well, I can tell you this: it doesn't have to do a season 3.
Because that shit's already been written.
Yeah, because it's based on the Time of Contempt.
Okay.
It's an article right here.
I would wonder, and I would kind of hope, because I actually like the story of the Wild Hunt, what they did with the game.
Yeah.
Obviously, that was my jumping off point for the Witcher series. Played that, and then read the books. Books were great. They just, in my mind, Sapkowski didn't really know how to end it, and so he kind of ended it a little weird. Not saying that I wouldn't be happy with the actual ending of the series, which was Geralt and Yennefer going to Avalon and living happily ever after until sometime in the future, because that's where the last book takes place. It's the future witches or sorceresses recounting or trying to figure out the history of what happened to Geralt.
Yeah.
And then one of them sees Geralt still fighting the good fight many years after he's supposedly has been dead. So I would like to see that. That's how they end the series. But they still, like, they do the books, and then they do, before he supposedly dies, they do the Wild Hunt, and then they do the him dying part. You know, that's what I want.
That'd be cool.
That would be cool.
Empire Magazine has Batman in it.
Which one? I've seen just tons of Batman stuff over the past couple of days.
No, it's the Empire. Empire Magazine has an article about it.
Oh, the Batman.
Yeah, the Batman, yeah.
Yeah. Because I've passed by a bunch of articles talking about Michael Keaton's Batman in Supergirl, I think it was. I didn't really read it because I don't watch Supergirl.
Don't blame you. It's over anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, it's done?
Yep.
Okay. So what does this article have to say about the Batman?
So it is entitled Darkest Night. And it says serial killers Claus and Kurt Cobain. In the world exclusive story, director Matt Reeves, star Robert Pattinson, and more tell us how we've never seen the Batman like this. And it goes on to tell about how Robert Pattinson based his performance of Bruce Wayne on Kurt Cobain.
That's an interesting take.
Yeah, we'll see what that's like.
I mean, it didn't end well with one guy, so
Haha. I haven't read this whole thing. I literally it came out today, I think. But there's a bunch of cool photos in it. And like there's a couple behind the scenes photos, some really cool pictures of Batman. Matt Reeves talking to Pattinson.
okay.
Cool picture of Selena Kyle breaking into a vault of some sort.
Nice.
The Riddler duct taping a victim. Oswald Cobblepot reading some documents in what looks to be a nightclub of some sort. Pretty cool shot of the bat suit. And then like there's the breakdown of stuff. Well, that's a really good shot of the Riddler I've never seen before.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I reckon, can I somehow copy this and send this?
You can copy the article and send it to me.
Oh, you have Apple News. What the fuck am I thinking about?
Yeah, I don't know.
Copy. Paste. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, some detective work there. It's so hard to believe that's Colin Farrell.
Every time I watch those trailers, I have to remind myself that's Colin Farrell. He doesn't look like him, obviously, but he doesn't have any mannerisms or he doesn't act like him, you know.
Yeah.
It's fantastic to see him in that role.
If you if you scroll down, you'll get to the picture of Riddler I was talking about.
Yeah, with the duct tape.
No, further down. There's another one.
Further down.
Yeah.
Okay. Matt Reeves, Selena Kyle. Oh, the full.
Yeah.
That is very. What's that one?
Zodiac
what's that
Killer.
Zodiac. Yeah, very Zodiac. I mean, which I suppose if that's what you're kind of basing him off of, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I would say. I mean, the Zodiac Killer was nobody knew what he looked like, and he had puzzles to his crimes for the police to figure out. So yeah, I guess that is he going to be like more like a serial killer in this, or is he just?
I guess so. I mean, I'm briefing over the interview section, and it even says Matt has said one of his big inspirations for the character was the Zodiac Killer. And he asks, did that form part of your research process? And this is talking to Paul Dano, and he says yes, it did.
Okay. I mean, I'm definitely down for a different take on that character. I mean, what else? He's the type of Batman character that obviously has been brought to the movies before, but in a very bombastic and outlandish way. So to bring him into more of a, I would say, Christopher Nolan type of Batman, more realistic Batman, you can't have that weird-ish cartoony style character. So I guess making him a serial killer is definitely one way to go in bringing him to life.
Yeah. I'll have to read that article more.
But I kind of actually like that as well because it gives Batman more of a serious thing, you know, to these criminals. They're not just stealing things, or they're not just trying to beat Batman in some sort of mind game. You know, there's actual stakes at risk here with, you know, him going out and killing people.
Yep.
Yeah. So I like that. Yeah, I definitely like that.
It's gonna be pretty neato, I think. It's time to do something different with it. Make it more. I don't want to say gritty, but more of a less of a spectacle, more of like a thriller type thing.
Yeah, it's definitely something I don't think that they've done, at least with the Batman franchise. Because even the Christopher Nolan movies were more spectacle.
Yeah, they were more realistic, but they were still, obviously outlandish in certain ways.
Yeah, definitely larger than life type things. Joker blowing up hospitals and taking prisoners and whatnot on a hostage on ferries. It's a very large scale thing. Where this, if it's a more small scale thing, Batman trying to stop a serial killer, which would be interesting that they are making it I get it. It is more of an interesting character to make it the Riddler because of the whole puzzle thing and the fact that you do have the link to something real life with the Zodiac killer. But you also have Zsasz, who is literally a serial killer in the Batman universe.
Yeah.
So you could have gone that route as well. But, obviously I think this one would be more interesting.
Give the Riddler a different type of spin in a way.
Yeah.
Ooh. His Dark Material Season 3.
Is that already on season 3?
Yeah.
Man.
Well, it's not out yet. I think this is...
No, it's not out yet, but my brother and I, we missed the first season, and so we, binge watched the first season and second season all at once.
Oh, okay. Easy to do.
Wow. That's awesome. When's it come out?
It says 2022. Let's see if it has a date. No, it does not. That's interesting, though.
What?
This says here, talks about it's kind of a blurb about the show and stuff, but it says his Dark Materials season 3 begins streaming next year.
That literally could be next, 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, but listen to the words though. Streaming.
Right.
Not premieres on HBO. Streaming. That's an interesting way of putting it. Is it gonna be?
I guess I wasn't thinking of it that way because we did stream it. That's how we.
But usually HBO does their stuff as it's just released on HBO.
Right. You can watch it if you have HBO, or you can watch it if you have HBO streaming.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I didn't think of it that way, just because, like I said, I don't have TV. Yeah, that's interesting. Are they moving it to a streaming only? Maybe pull in more people to their streaming stuff, which is kind of dumb, but
yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, why would you? I imagine that were tons of people that watched it on TV, but then again, if you have HBO, don't you have HBO streaming?
Yeah.
So I guess you're not really out of luck necessarily. It's just a weird way to put things.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah. It doesn't say anything about it. It was a weird way of putting it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's premiering and it also streams at the same time, so I guess it makes sense, but it's just a weird way of saying it.
Yeah.
It says it's it's based on the third and final book, and it will be the last season.
Okay. I mean, I'm good with that. If there were only 3 books in the series, I haven't read it yet. If there were only 3 books in the series, don't stretch it out.
Yep. Dun dun dun. That's cool. All right, another article to read. Let's move on to an actual topic that we both know we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I think it's time.
We're beating around the said bush. We're here to talk about Spider-Man: No Way Home.
Yep.
So Joseph, let's get your thoughts and your outlook on the movie.
Overall, I really enjoyed the movie. Hold on. Spider-Man, no way. Oh, there it is.
Spider-Man.
Because I know I'm going to forget like cast names and stuff like that. IMDb, where the fuck are you?
Haha.
There you are. Anyway, in general, I really enjoyed the movie. I know going into it, a lot of people were saying that it's basically like I didn't read reviews, but like there were headlines that I read before, days before that actually released that were like, it's like the Endgame, but with Spider-Man. Yeah, it's very much that like big action affects the MCU type of movie. And the overall broad strokes of it, it's a very good movie. The only things that I didn't really care for in it were pretty much the things that really drove the story along, though. And that's just the fact of how quickly they were to set up the spell in order to make everybody forget that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. That it literally was just like, hey, man, can you make it so that everybody can forget that I'm Spider-Man? And he's like, sure, let's just do that. And blah, 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 blah. And like, we're already making the spell. And it's like, then that's where we get to Spider-Man, Peter Parker. Like, oh, so-and-so should remember me. Oh, so-and-so should remember that I'm Spider-Man. Oh, so-and-so should remember I'm Spider-Man. And that's where things go awry. And it's like, could we not have just taken 5 minutes to be like, this is what the spell does. If we go down this road, this is what it's going to happen. Is there any considerations thing that you want to consider doing this? Oh, I'd like to, have Mary J. remember that I'm Spider-Man. Oh, that my Aunt May and my best friend, I'm always forgetting his name, see?
Ned,
should remember that I'm Spider-Man. Like, had you took like 5-10 minutes to talk things out and just be like, okay, this is what happens. This is why it would be a good idea. This is maybe not why it would be a good idea. Here's how we can alter the spell to get it correct. You wouldn't have this movie, and that's just kind of dumb to me. That how you moved into it so fast. Yeah. There's another scene towards the middle that very similar. Just the whole the villains have to go back to their universe. You can't just sit there and talk about it for a few minutes and explain everything that's going on, everything that has to happen, and whatever Peter's reservations of it are. That one I do understand a bit more with the fact that his Aunt May is really trying to teach him that he really should try and help people, and that's really what Spider-Man is, honestly. It's trying to help people. And that's what he does. It just, instead of talking about it with, Strange, and I guess he was trying to really talk to Strange about maybe trying to help these people rather than just sending them back to die. Things would have been a little bit different, but either way, I do think that its ultimate goal of getting Spider-Man to be back to the normal, everyday Spider-Man that we really should have, rather than this. Because honestly, by the end of the last movie, you had basically Iron Man Spider-Man. He basically had access to all the tech in the world, which is not Spider-Man. At least not early Spider-Man. He had access to a lot of money through Stark. He was well on his way to MIT. He had a lot of stuff going for him up until people found out that he was Peter Parker was Spider-Man. Like, that's just not the Spider-Man of at least the animated Spider-Man, which is where I really come from with Spider-Man. Didn't really read a whole lot of the early comic books of Spider-Man, but the animated Spider-Man was more of just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. You know, he didn't have all this high-tech stuff. So being able to, by the end of the movie, reset him, take away all of that cool tech, which to me sucks because I'm a cool tech person, but I understand that now he's just, like I keep saying, he's just your regular, average, you know, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man now, and not this character that is almost too powerful for his own good at this point in time. Maybe down the road, you could reintroduce this stuff, and you could get stuff like, I know Superior Spider-Man was working towards, you know, a more high-tech Spider-Man. Granted, that was Doc Ock inhabiting Peter Parker's mind and blah, 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 but at least he was already a smart, you know, he's always been a smart kid, but by the time Superior Spider-Man comes along, he actually has access to a lot of that stuff. So, yeah. The action was good. I mean, there's not much more to say about this movie because it's just an MCU movie. The action's great. The visuals are spot on and fantastic as well. The other, bringing over the other two Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, absolutely fantastic, and I love the interaction that they all have with each other. Weirdly enough, to me, it just seemed that Andrew Garfield was a bit more like lovey-dovey kind of a Spider-Man, which I didn't really get. I never saw Amazing Spider-Man 2. But I did see the first one. He didn't really come off that way in the first movie. But it's funny to see those interactions with those two, or with all three of them together, especially the jokes that they make with each other, talking about where Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man makes his webs and whether or not, you know, he can shoot web from anywhere else. Just so awkward and so funny. Yeah, that's pretty much all else I have to say about it. With the exception of the end credit scene, still left me. I talked to Mike about this one with the end credit scene because it got me confused for a little bit with the Tom Hardy in it, and the fact that only the people that were pulled over to this Spider-Man's world were people who knew that Spider-Man was Peter Parker, but somehow Tom Hardy's Venom gets pulled over as well. And Mike did remind me that there was apparently a scene in the first Venom movie that he mentions that he can like feel other Venoms from other universes, or he's lived a long time and across multiple universes or something like that. So it's more of the Venom character that has maybe not a direct understanding that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, but an indirect.
The symbiote.
The symbiote knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. So, okay, that's all of that for me. But it was still just, as a regular viewer, I didn't understand it type of thing. That was something that had to be pulled back and re-understood for me. You know, kind of taking a more of a throwaway line from another movie that I wouldn't even watch going up to this movie. If I would have, you know, I would have watched just to pre-game for this movie. I just would have watched the regular Spider-Man movies to get up to this. So I bet that all I'm saying really is I bet that that end credit scene, while cool, still left a lot of people wondering why he was even in it if he didn't know who Spider-Man was, he himself. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, the only reason they had him in it is so they can get a symbiote in the MCU.
Right, and that's definitely one way to bring it over.
You know,
it'll be interesting to know if going forward, they introduce the Eddie Brock character to bring that symbiote to Spider-Man. Namor to be Venom in this universe. If they have their Eddie Brock in this universe,
Yeah,
it would be hilarious if it were just Tom Hardy.
it'd make Paige happy if it's for sure.
If it's just Tom Hardy, but it's Tom Hardy from this universe,
Yeah.
not Tom Hardy from the other universe, so he can still play both Tom Hardys, but it's just different Tom Hardys. Yeah. What was your take on it?
I dug it a lot. I thought it was fun. My only gripe, actually, I have a couple, but not like, oh my god, it's ruined it. The only question I have is, we never saw it happen or told about it, but somehow he's no longer a suspect or being accused of killing Mysterio at the end of the movie.
Well, I think, yeah, that kind of, like, they addressed, but not directly addressed with Charlie Cox's character, with Daredevil.
Well, yes, I just would like to know, because when we get to the end of it, obviously some time has passed. Spoil alert. Like, we didn't spoil stuff already. He goes to confront MJ and Ned. Chickens out because he realizes, I'm going to give them a shot at having normal lives. They are in MIT, blah, blah, blah. He goes to his new apartment. You see it flash forward a little bit. His apartment's set up. He has the mask there, grabs it, jumps out the window dressed as Spider-Man. You see he's got a different suit on now. He handmade it like he did his original one. And then that's it. He's swinging through the city, and everything seems fine. You know what I mean? But, like, the whole beginning of this movie was not only is Peter Parker Spider-Man, but Spider-Man killed Mysterio maliciously.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty interesting plot point that they just kind of, they really did just kind of go, well, you're off the hook for it, so don't do anything bad again. But Happy, you're probably going to be under investigation for stuff that's missing.
Yeah, because Charlie Cox...
That was it.
Yeah, or Matt Murdock says to him, they won't be able to get these charges to stick. And he tells him, he's like, good. But then he tells Happy Hogan he's representation because he's liable for it as well because, all the things, right? Dandy, okay, that tells me that Matt believes that there's no case against Peter. Cool. But we all know the public isn't easily forgetting when it comes to murders, especially someone who's in the limelight. People still know Spider-Man. They just don't know Peter's Spider-Man. But Spider-Man still killed Mysterio in the eyes of the public. And Charlie says that. Matt Murdock says that. The court of public opinion. But never did they address it after that fact.
Yeah.
So that was very weird to me.
And I still wonder about how far back that spell goes. Because at the end of the movie, it's still something that, like, it kind of bothered me after the movie, now thinking about it especially too. The original spell was just everyone forgets that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Clear.
Yep.
Events of the movies could still move forward. It's just that everyone forgets that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. But the spell at the end of the movie was everyone forgets that Peter Parker exists.
No.
Wasn't it?
No. So the original one was everyone who knew... So everyone would forget Peter Parker is Spider-Man, right? The first one. The second one is everyone will forget who Peter Parker is, right?
Yeah, and that's basically exists.
Yeah, so who he is. So that goes back through everything. The one problem I have with that is...
But that's what I mean. Like, how far does that spell go back? If everyone forgets who Peter Parker is, that means that Mysterio possibly never happens.
No, because Mysterio
That's what I'm wondering. No, but that's what I'm wondering. How far does that spell go back?
Well, I think that's in existence.
At that point, but that's what I mean. At that point, then, when you think about how MJ and Ned get into MIT, is that the MIT recruiter rethinking their submission,
No, it goes past that.
or that's what I mean, or does it go before that? And so that's their original submissions. So that spell travels back in time. If that spell travels back in time, then it could affect Mysterio, and Mysterio knowing who Spider-Man is.
So Mysterio wouldn't know who Spider-Man was because nobody knew who Spider-Man was. But Mysterio still happens because Spider-Man exists. Because his whole thing wasn't until he found out who Spider-Man was. He was trying to deface Stark at that point.
Yes.
It just happened to be that he found out that Parker was Spider-Man, so he used that against him. But
so at that point, at the point in time that he finds out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, has to be erased.
It is erased.
Because he would at that point become somebody that knows who Peter Parker is. So the ending of that is changed now.
The only part of that ending that changes is the fact he releases who Spider-Man is, not what happens between him and Spider-Man. Because the events between him and Spider-Man have nothing to do with Peter Parker. It has to do with Mysterio being a piece of shit who's trying to act like a hero and then not being a hero. That's the whole thing. But it's the ending that still happens. He just doesn't release publicly who Spider-Man is. He just would then have a video of Spider-Man killing air quotes, killing him or murdering him with the Stark drones. That's the only difference that would happen.
I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is that because him knowing who Peter was had nothing to do with the confrontation between those two. It just added to it because even Peter didn't know that he knew at the end until the very end reveal of, the murder video and the release of his identity. But the murder video still would be a thing that happened. Because he was still, obviously going after all Stark everything. Just not Peter. But my question would be, at what point is he still looked at as being a murderer? Obviously, no one's going after Peter Parker for it. They're just going after Spider-Man. And obviously, Jonah Jameson will always go after Spider-Man for everything because he's a vigilante that he doesn't like. So that was my only thing. The other one I had, which I love the moment, but it made no sense to me, was the interaction between Peter, or the mysterious boy in the hoodie, at the gravesite of May Parker.
Mm-hmm.
How would Happy have a relationship with May that had to do with Spider-Man if he didn't know who Spider-Man was?
And again, it's that weirdness of it, because I still want to go back to because again, it just to me it just depends on how far that spell goes back in time. Because if everyone forgets who Peter is, even his classmates at that time wouldn't know who Peter was. So Stark, would essentially not know who Peter was. So then why would he even have the Stark tech to begin with to make that, the ending of Spider-Man Far From Home?
So that just erases all of the other
that
movies?
would just erase all of the second movie. That's what I'm saying.
No, it would
because at that point too, you're right. At that point too, with Happy, they both say, "How did you meet?" Or Happy asks him, "How did you meet Aunt May?" And he says, "Through Spider-Man." It's through Spider-Man, and you're right. But it's like, how would Happy meet Aunt May then? Obviously he still remembers her. Why would he have a relationship with her knowing that she's Spider-Man's aunt? How would then you not but you just don't know that there's a Peter Parker in the picture.
Not just that though. If you think about it, if it goes all the way back retroactive, he would have never been in Civil War either.
Exactly. Right.
So he's no longer an Avenger.
Right.
That's weird.
Isn't it? That's what I'm saying. That's what I mean by how far does this spell go back? Because it obviously retcons some things in this movie itself, if you think about it, like I said, with the MIT paperwork and whatnot. So if it affects that, if that's the original MIT submissions, then obviously it goes back in time to change things because no one would know. Then that's what my statement was. No one knows that Peter exists because that would affect everything within the MCU. Okay?
I have another question.
Okay.
If it goes all the way back and nobody knows who Peter is, then how are Ned and MJ friends?
I can only assume that they become natural friends.
Interesting.
But it is one of those things, exactly like Happy and Aunt May. How do they still know each other through Spider-Man if they don't know Peter Parker first?
Yeah. And Happy would have never met May, even with Spider-Man, because Tony wouldn't have brought Spider-Man in. Well, he might have. He still... Okay, actually, think about it. He might have still brought Spider-Man in, but at that point, he would have... Did he just not investigate who Spider-Man was? Because he obviously went after Parker.
Right.
Huh. Interesting.
Yep.
Very interesting. I guess
it's something to think about. And that's what I mean by the final spell was different than the original spell. So how much of an effect does that final spell have on the past of Spider-Man? Because like I said, it wasn't a spell that essentially said everyone forgets that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. It's a spell that essentially says that everyone forgets about Peter Parker.
Yeah, because the difference would be that someone would still know. Like they would just erase the public eye portion of it, but obviously, I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. I'd have to watch the movie again.
Like, yeah, because even if everyone just forgot that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, the Avenger would, like you said, still know Spider-Man is an Avenger. Yeah. They don't have to know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. They just have to know that Spider-Man is an Avenger. And that's how that would... I was going to say for a second there that's kind of how that would still solve the Happy situation. Because Happy still knows Spider-Man, but still somehow know Aunt May through Spider-Man wouldn't make sense at all. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like that final spell was different from the original one. How far back does that spell go to make everyone forget about Peter Parker completely? Because it would have to go back at least early enough for MJ and Ned to not know who Peter is.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, because you could get around the whole Avengers not knowing Spider-Man because they would, because Tony was looking for obviously keeping track of super beings and things like that. So he would have reached out, and Tony obviously would have technology to just the way he found. He didn't just look at him and go, "That's Peter Parker." He obviously tracked his Spider-Man's movements and followed him back to where he was, did his research, and found out who he was. But at that point, how does it change? Because if you go back to Civil War, the only people who knew were Tony and Happy, because Spider-Man never took his mask off during the events.
Correct.
Until he was in the car with Tony in the whole events of the first Spider-Man of Homecoming.
Correct.
So Spider-Man still would be an Avenger. He would still go forward with... So Tony would have known, but Tony doesn't exist anymore. So, yeah, I wonder how that would have worked. Because obviously, things couldn't have changed enough where it would have been the same thing. Not with Happy, that still makes no sense. But the thing with Mysterio, there still would have been a Spider-Man. He was still gifted stuff by Tony because he was gifted the suit in Civil War. Interesting.
But that's just still assuming that everyone forgets that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, not that Peter Parker exists, essentially.
Yeah, because it doesn't erase Spider-Man; it erases Peter.
Mm-hmm.
So Spider-Man still exists in the public eye. It would still exist in the Avengers worlds or circles, I should say. He never. It's interesting. It still doesn't fix the Happy thing though, because that makes no sense.
No, the Happy thing still doesn't make sense at all. Yeah. He should have forgotten about Aunt May at the same time as forgetting about
Peter.
Because that's another thing to think about. Then does MJ and Ned know about Aunt May? Because all that they're forgetting is Peter.
So I wonder if it's this way. I wonder if everyone forgets who Peter Parker is, not that they knew him. So it doesn't go back and say Peter never existed. Everyone just forgets they know Peter Parker. And because you don't know who Peter Parker is,
it's essentially like they just never made friends with him.
Yes.
So he's still a kid in school. You have a vague recollection of kids in school, but you just never were friends with him.
And they could, because no one remembers who he is, everything that those cogs just fall apart, right? It doesn't reset anything. It just, everyone forgets they knew Peter Parker, but they still know things, you know what I mean? Because Happy would have interacted with May because he drove Peter and Tony to the fundraiser. So he would have met her. He just wouldn't have met Parker. Like he did, but because of the spell, it erased the knowledge of, not that he existed, but the knowledge of, like all of a sudden when you associate Peter Parker and Spider-Man, right? So you know Spider-Man and you know the events that happen with Spider-Man. But if you take out the knowledge of Peter, you still have those connections that you made with Spider-Man. You just don't know how, other than the fact that Spider-Man is associated with these events, and these events also have to do with May, and have to do with MJ, and have to do with Ned. But those connections between all those moving pieces and Peter is just that Peter's taken out. That makes more sense.
That does make a lot more sense. So literally, if Happy tries to remember, let's say towards the end scene of Far From Home, where they're in the one of Stark's jets,
the Quinjet,
Peter's Quinjet, making a new Spider-Man suit essentially to go fight Mysterio. That, if he were trying to remember that,
Spider-Man,
because it was a heart-wrending moment where he's acting like Tony. And Happy starts blasting AC/DC, and Peter is like, "Oh, I love Led Zeppelin." Like, that still happens, but it's either Spider-Man always wearing Spider-Man suits and no one knows that he's Spider-Man, or it's just blank.
Yep.
Like, the event still happens, but it's just like, who is Spider-Man is just gone.
Yeah. It's the only way to explain it.
It makes more sense than, like, it's still erasing Peter from existence per se,
but only memory
but
of.
Not from, yeah.
So, like, anybody who knew Peter would forget Peter, but Peter still exists because he would. You can't
but
just.
Peter's connections would still be there. It's literally, if Aunt May were still alive, it would literally just be like, I know Happy because of Spider-Man, because that's the only connection that they would have at that point.
But she wouldn't remember Peter.
Right, but she wouldn't remember Peter at all.
She would just remember...
Would be no Peter for her.
Yep. She would just know that Spider-Man came to a fundraiser event once, and Happy was there, and things like that. Never would it be I have a nephew who is Peter Parker, she just wouldn't remember him being a thing.
It'd be still really weird with MJ and Ned because they know Aunt May, but they would have no direct connection as to how they know Aunt May.
Yeah.
But it's solved because Aunt May's dead.
Yes. They, in their brains, they would still know, but because they didn't know Pete, they don't remember Peter. They don't remember Aunt May because she is dead now, so they would never run into her, obviously.
But I mean, they still know her.
They just don't.
In this line of reasoning, they would still have to know her and know everything about her that they would normally know about her. They just wouldn't know their connection to her.
Yeah, there would always be a blank spot if they just you know who your dad is, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so same idea. They know that's May Parker. That's it. There's no, in their brains, that spell makes their brains go over the fact there's a Peter and go right to, oh yeah, it's May Parker. She lives down the street or whatever happens to be, or she runs that center where they help people with issues or whatever it happens to be. So that would explain the Happy thing, and Aunt May, because the events that happened, it didn't change them. It just changed who, they don't remember Peter. It's not that they never met Peter. They just can't remember Peter. So it automatically associates with Spider-Man because there is no other, connection. It just goes, this, Peter and Spider-Man are this. If Peter disappears, Spider-Man still, that trajectory still exists.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's the only way to explain it all. Yeah. And then you're right. The events of Spider-Man 2 would still happen. It's just that Spider-Man would be the one that kills Mysterio. But it is still kind of a plot hole that they just kind of... not a plot hole, but I wouldn't call it a plot hole necessarily.
An unresolved...
Something unresolved thing that they began the movie with, because you ended the previous movie with, and then they just kind of well, yeah, I'm pretty sure you don't have to worry about it. And then they just dropped it for the rest of the movie.
Yeah. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, he says. Anyway, how'd you like the Spider-Man?
I loved it. I thought it was a very a fun way to transition into where we're at now with the multiverse and a way to play with it. Obviously, it's definitely playing on the success of Into the Spider-Verse. My one gripe, again, about, and it's not taking away from the movie, the one thing I wish would have happened earlier is the inclusion of the other Spider-Man. I think it would have been better if that scenario, that scene where basically MJ and Ned are trying to locate Peter, and they call forth the other Peter Parkers, Peter 2 and Peter 3. I wish it would have happened earlier, so then it would have been the three of them going after, and you could have had slightly better fight scenes versus a bad guy assisting Peter with capturing another bad guy.
Yeah.
Now, granted, you took the one bad guy of all of the technically 5 we had involved in this, obviously. Or 5, 4? 4?
Lizard, Doc Ock, Sandman, Shocker.
Oh, no, I was right, 5. So 5. It's Electro, by the way, not Shocker. Shocker's a different one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Electro and then Green Goblin.
So it just, you had Sandman help Peter capture Electro, right?
Yeah.
You had the Doc Ock thing. Obviously, he just hacked the arms because the nanobots, and he's that's what they do, because that's what Tony designed them to do. So that makes sense to arms turn against Doc, because that's what it works. So that one, I'm not upset about that one. It's just at the point where they would have figured out that there's other spider villains out there from other dimensions or other universes. I really wish they would have brought in the other 2 Spider-Men to help him versus having a Sandman help him, and then eventually good Doc Ock. You know what I mean? I like the fact that they switched Doc to being good, because in the Sam Raimi universe, he wasn't evil until his brain got corrupted by the chip. So fixing the chip fixed the evil in him, right? Because he wasn't bad. He was a good guy. So I like that spin on it, because that's a very cool way of doing it. What I don't like is the fact that it was such an easy fix and he was just on Peter's side.
Right.
I would have liked it if it were the other way, if it just made him more of a monster. Because, not because Peter did a bad job, it's because all along, Norman, Green Goblin, was affecting how it worked. Like, he was sabotaging Peter's work, and it would have just made them worse. You know what I
mean? I was kind of expecting that as well. Even when they got down to the making of the serum, I was like, ooh, he's tampered with the serum. It's going to make him stronger if he takes it. And so when Aunt May jabs him and it doesn't work, it was like, oh, it doesn't just make him stronger? Like, you're right, because when he makes the chip and stuff, Willem Dafoe is such a fantastic, and so is Alfred Molina. I will say the whole, his acting to go from Doc Ock to essentially just
Green Goblin.
To Doc Ock.
Oh, Doc Ock, yeah, to Octavius.
From Doc Ock to essentially Dr. Otto Octavius is fantastic, because you can see in his expressions the idea of, like, he's got all this shit going on in his head, and suddenly now he doesn't, and he's voicing it by saying that the voices in his head have stopped, and it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic acting. But Willem Dafoe, absolutely fantastic acting as well, because you can tell when he is Norman Osborn and he's very skittish and very scared. He understands that he's doing something wrong, but he can't really control himself. And there's a hint of it when he's making the anti-serum for himself, that it's not him anymore. That it's taken over. And I caught on to it, and that's, like you said, at that point in time, I would have expected the things that they were making to counter those powers to actually not counter those powers, and maybe even enhance the powers.
If it were me, again, nobody cares, but if it were me, this is how I would have played it out. I would have had Norman sabotage them to enhance them. So instead of the battery to suck out the electrical charge out of Electro, it would have enhanced it. Mm-hmm. He would have somehow copied the arc reactors in a crude way for him to pull from, right? Because having the arc reactor was a really clever way of making Electro powerful outside of just being able to suck electricity out of something. Because if that's how his power works, you just have to get him away from electricity, and he's useless. But if you give him the ultimate battery, that is a battery that's going to burn forever, he is going to be dangerous.
Yeah.
With Doc Ock, the chip should have malfunctioned, and it should have made him psychotic. And it should have been like it's working, and all of a sudden, like, he does something, and then it switches, it burns out, and does whatever. For Norman, I was thinking about this when I was watching it. I was like, oh shit, she gets him with it, right? It's going to turn him into the ultimate version of Green Goblin, where he turns into the actual Goblin.
Yeah.
That's where I was thinking it was going, and then, like, obviously it was just a placebo, and he's like, haha, electrolytes, that's what plants crave. And then he just fucking, obviously murder, death, killed Aunt May in front of Peter in one of the most horrific, heart-wrenching scenes ever in an MCU movie. The only other scene I was so emotionally hit with in the MCU was the Peggy Carter remembering Steve and then forgetting Steve.
Yeah.
It was that, like, it's I Love You 3000 level of, like, holy shit, what is wrong with you people? I'm trying to have a good time.
Yeah.
And you just go in and you just pluck that fucking heartstring, like...
But another thing is that it has to happen. It's that type of thing that has to happen in Spider-Man, and this Spider-Man just skirted it way too long because the other Spider-Man's known for being like Batman. Somebody has to die in order for him to really become a superhero and learn that with great power comes great responsibility. This Spider-Man never had that. So he skated along for a while.
He had it in the form of Tony, but then it was Aunt May who was literally the closest, well, it was relative, the closest person he's ever had with him all his life.
Exactly.
Was taken from him that way, and it just happened to be that moment. So it was like, you're right. We went through 3 whole movies with never that, that Uncle Ben moment.
That Uncle Ben moment, exactly.
But it just, and that's what the cool thing about it is, I think, was the tipping scale of like, if the other Peters weren't here, he would have murdered Green Goblin.
Oh, definitely. That was rage in his eyes.
Yeah, like if he didn't, like, even if they weren't here, like they didn't show up, right? They didn't do it. He would have come together to take down the other villains, and he would have been face to face with Green Goblin still, right? Mm-hmm. And he would have got the upper hand because he got that, like, you saw that just Hulk rage build up in him. And he's like, I'm stronger than you know. I've been pulling my punches. Get ready to fucking get, like, dirty fought. And he did.
Yeah.
He was fucking kicking him in his knees. He was webbing him to the floor. He had counters, and he just beat the shit out of him. And if he wasn't for any of the Peters being there, he would have murdered him right then and there. And it would have been a Mysterio all over again. Obviously, the reason we had the other Peters was for this moment, because he needs that exterior push, because Toby didn't have it, and he said that, and it took him years to come out of it. Something bad obviously happened. Andrew had it, and losing Gwen Stacy. And he even said, like, he's never been the same. And you can see he has fun while being Spider-Man, but there's those moments where he got dark, you know? And it wasn't until he had that camaraderie where he really came out of his shell, and more of the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, or the Amazing Spider-Man as he's known on Marvel.com now. But that just obviously story-wise, that's why they were there as well, to help to give us that rebooted Spider-Man feel, but also drive home the fact that you're a hero. There are losses that are going to happen. You can't be the reason why those lives are lost. You have to be better than the rest.
Mm-hmm.
It's that. I think that's one of the best parts about the other two Spider-Mans, 2 and 3, is you got to see their, like, where they were in their lives, right? But then you got to see, or you got to have them teach Peter those lessons that they unfortunately had to go through, where, like, you need to be better than you possibly could be.
Yeah.
We weren't. We failed at one point. Like, Toby obviously was a very shut down human being. Like, right? Andrew, same thing. There was something dark that happened. And there's this moment that I kept thinking about in this movie where they ask Toby about his, like, do you have somebody? And at first he's down about it, and then he's like, yes. And I'm wondering if what they were trying to hint at is he did have Mary Jane, but Mary Jane died, or something else happened. Was it a Peter B. Parker situation where he just couldn't balance life and Spider-Man, and it crumbled the relationship? Or was it, and I can't remember the issues or what run it was, but was she killed due to Peter being Spider-Man? He was happy. They were together. She was taken from him.
Yeah.
Because it's that tragic thing. Like you say, Peter needs that someone close to him to die, to transform into that hero, right? The ultimate version of himself. That obviously in most situations is always Ben Parker.
Mm-hmm.
Uncle Ben, as some would say. I'm wondering if it's a thing. Obviously, Andrew Garfield, he lost Ben. He lost Mary Jane. And
Right.
he looked like he was he was skulking around a dark alley when they found him. You know what I mean? He was more comfortable in the shadows than he was in the light.
Yeah.
You see Toby's. He's dressed in plain clothes. Classic Spider-Man, long sleeves, obviously, has the suit underneath.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to think, again, me, and who cares what I think, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think that's what they're trying to give us. They're giving us those. These are three of the options you have if you're Spider-Man. You could be on the top of the world, like Holland, like Spider-Man 1 or Peter 1. Then an event like Mysterio happens. Your identity is given up, and you have to do something to overcome this. Prove that you're not a murderer. Live with the fact that everyone knows who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was crumbling under that.
Yeah.
You jump to Andrew, Peter 3, as I believe they called him in the movie. He was the lowest point he could be. He'd lost Ben. He went after the murderer. He got his vengeance, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't the one that did it, but he was killed. Went forward, was having a good time, lost Mary Jane, and literally looked like he never recovered.
Right.
You have Toby's, or Peter 2, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, as he's known in Marvel.com. We know his arc, right? We see all three movies. We see him. We see the highs. We see the lows. We see the ultimate terribleness of Spider-Man 3. But then in this one, you see that he's accepted certain things, but also he's hiding certain things. He never mentions MJ.
No.
He refers to MJ, but never gives you any details, which means he's come out of something, and he knows. And he obviously says, like, you know, I watched Uncle Ben die. I got my vengeance. I've learned from that. Then he hints at other stuff, and I'm just wondering if that's what they meant for us to see in those other iterations. That if you cannot be the best you, this is where you could go. But maybe eventually you can go here and be the older, more wise Spider-Man that may be just lonely and maybe just, you know, sometimes has to wear sweats out when he goes fights crime. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's just my thoughts. That's what I would like to imagine. Is that really what happens? Who knows? Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe I want to read too much into it. But I ultimately answer your question, Joe. I loved this movie. I think it was a great way. If I didn't know a fact ahead of time, it would have been a great way to sign off on Tom Holland's Spider-Man. We now know that he signed a new contract for 6 more movies. Be it, we don't know how many Spider-Man movies versus MCU movies,
Right.
MCU proper movies, like team-up movies, things like that. Because he could appear in the Fantastic Four, for example, which they did
Right.
not tease whatsoever. By the way,
No.
like, thank you, but also, god damn it, why? So he could show up in there. A lot of things, obviously, with the teaser scene we referred to earlier, with Tom Hardy being phased back out. And I was thinking of this too. Is like I thought the same way you were thinking. Why was that version brought across? But I think it has to do with the stinger scene as well. At the end of Venom 2, where they see the news. Obviously, they're brought across through the multiverse. He appears in the same hotel room. Obviously, not his hotel room at that point. And he sees the news story about Peter and Spider-Man, right? Venom looks at it as like, let's tasty morsel, blah blah blah, right? Mike might be correct about assuming that's the collective knowledge of the symbiote remembering something that happened, but also we don't know if Eddie had run-ins with a Peter Parker when he was in New York previously before going to San Francisco.
And there was a picture of a Spider-Man in the first movie, if I recall right, wasn't there?
There's a mention of something to do with Spider-Man. There was never a picture of, but there was reference to something. There was this was years ago, obviously, when the first Venom movie came out. There was a thing I read or a video I watched where it mentioned Eddie going to San Francisco because he was fired by J. Jonah Jameson from the Daily Bugle because Jonah found out that, if I remember correctly, Jonah found out that Eddie knew the identity of Spider-Man and did not tell him, and he fired him because of it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember that at all.
Because in the movie he refers to he can't he got fired, had to move out of New York or whatever, and is in San Francisco. There again, I don't remember what book it's in or whatever, but there's a story that happens where he literally finds out who Peter is or who Spider-Man is, and withholds that knowledge from Jonah, and he gets livid and fires him because obviously he wants to unmask who he is, and he just won't tell him. So I'm wondering if that's how he's brought across, because Peter Parker is Spider-Man, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, as we know now from any universe that has a Peter Parker that is Spider-Man. That's why, obviously, Toby's brought across, Andrew's brought across, Goblin's brought across. All those guys are brought across because they know. Now, the one, though, I did see a video on, and this is the last point I'll bring up before we wrap this up.
Okay.
Someone in a video said that Electro never knew Peter was Spider-Man.
Yeah, and Mike, now that you mention it, Mike brought that up too. Like I said, I never saw Amazing Spider-Man 2, so I have no idea.
But I could have... I haven't watched it in years because it's not a very good movie. It just falls flat, and the villains are very blah. Except for the Rhino's hilarious, but at least Green Goblin doesn't ride a snowboard, but whatever. But there's I could have swore there's a scene when he says something to Electro that lets Electro know who he is. Because in the movie, Electro's obsessed with Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And he wants to be, he wishes he could be a better version of himself to be like Hero. And when he gets his powers, he believes he can be, and then shit goes wrong, and he realizes that he can't be because he's not good at things, and he kind of fucks his brain up or whatever. But I could have swore at the end of that movie there was something that Peter said to him to throw him off his game that let him know who he was. I just can't remember. I'd have to rewatch it to find out. But I remember someone saying something on one of the videos, like one of the two videos I watched after I saw the movie, that said something along those lines where, like, why does Electro know? I could be wrong. It just could be like a mistake. But who fucking knows? We also because the other thing too is, why is Electro and Green Goblin brought across before their deaths? Same thing with Otto, right?
Right. It's not like they were pulled from their universes at the time of the spell happening, necessarily. Time traveling at different rates in different universes, possibly, but that it seemed to pull them out just before they died.
So they didn't know they died.
So they didn't know that they died.
Yeah.
In their universes. Yeah.
And because Electro talks about it, he's like, I was one with the grid, I could feel it because that's what happens. Again, you haven't seen it in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Is he tries to absorb too much energy and he becomes pure energy and he gets pulled into the grid, and that's how he gets killed.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, sort of. I think in that one, I say he got captured in it. I can't remember what it was. Like I said, it's been a long time since I watched it, and I didn't rewatch it before this because I didn't care enough to. Same reason I didn't watch the Tobey Maguire ones. I've seen the Tobey Maguire ones so many times I don't need a refresher on them, especially the third one. But I would guess to say it's a creative license on some of it. Yes, some would say plot holes, but I would say let's just use this as an opportunity to have a fun time and bring these across. It's not a Bible, not a religious sense, but like, a word for word type thing. That's why I look at it, because it's just for fun. It's not for we're not reciting what happened in World War II. We're just talking about funny books and people in funny costumes fighting other people in funny costumes. So I don't take that too much to heart, but I would like some explanation or maybe a thought process about those things from the people who made it.
There is one more thought process to end the discussion, at least with Electro, that thinking about right now could explain it, is that we're just assuming that it's Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man because it's Jamie Foxx. But from what I understand, he looks different.
He does. So
this still could be Electro Jamie Foxx, but that would still take place in Andrew Garfield led Spider-Man universe, but not the one that we saw.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah, because in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, he was Edward Nygma style, like ridiculous. He had bad teeth, bad complexion, bad posture, and then he was bitten by the eels, mutated eels essentially, or modified eels because he can't use mutants. You can't use the word mutants. They were modified, and when he got bit by them, and his body transformed, and he became blue and had like his veins look like lightning, or electricity, and his skin was, I say blue, but it glowed from the inside. He was luminescent because
it was Dr. Manhattan. That's what he reminds me of, Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, very much so.
Like see-through Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, and so he didn't have, and in this one he came across and his body was reformed, I guess apparently by the advancements in electricity in this universe because of Stark, because as we found out in both Andrews and Toby's, there is no Avengers.
Right.
So obviously the enhancements are different here. So electricity grid, and again we can throw stones and say it's probably because of Tony's arc technology, electricity is better. Right? That's just a detail in this world. So he's able to be a little different. And obviously, and I do have one more thing after this, and we'll wrap it up, that I noticed, and I want to ask you if you noticed it too.
Okay.
But you could, and to your point, yes, you could say like this is a variation on the variation of this is Jamie Foxx's Electro, his not Miles. What was his name? Doesn't matter. I can look it up, but I'm not going to. It's in front of me. Max Dillon, that's his name. I was like, not Miles. It's Miles Morales. That's weird. It could be a Max Dillon Electro, just a slightly different version of it than what we saw in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Just another multiverse. Like, there could be another multiverse where there is another Andrew Garfield looking Spider-Man, and the villains are slightly different. And Jamie Foxx could be that one. So he would know the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man or Spider-Man 3, as he is, and maybe in that universe, he at one point knew Peter was Spider-Man.
Yeah.
All right. So there's a scene in this that I'd have to watch it again, and I probably will at one point when it comes out, that I thought was pretty cool that I haven't seen anyone talk about, and I haven't watched all the videos or read anything about it because I don't care enough to spend my time. I have other things to do. That I thought was pretty cool, and it was the visualization of the spider sense. And do you know the scene I'm talking about? Not what happens around Peter. It's literally you can see it.
That you can see the spider sense go off?
Yes. And it's akin to your favorite and Mike's favorite, the cartoon, the animated version. So if you remember how that looks in the cartoon.
Yeah, I remember how that looks in the cartoon. I'm just trying to think of like the scenes, because I know I can't even remember the exact scene itself, but they're all together and they all sense something's about to happen. And was it Ned or somebody's like, "Ooh, your spider sense is like thinging," or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember the scene. No, I don't recall seeing like a visual representation of spider sense going off.
So when Tom Holland, Tom tries to take the Trappy Cube thing from Doctor Strange, and they have the magic fight in the street, which made me laugh that nobody stopped and like, what the fuck's happening here? They're just like walking around their business. Cars are driving by. And
when you've gone through like alien invasions and whatnot, it might just be a Tuesday.
Yeah, right. He palm strikes Peter out of his. He separates him, right. When he's going towards him, you see the spider sense, like almost in like opaque, clearish lightning bolts around his head, and he realizes that he can obviously still affect his body, but like there's danger involved. Now, I could be high, and it was very late. We know it was very past my bedtime when we saw this. But I could have swore that happened, and I'd have to watch it.
Yeah, we'd have to find it again and watch it again. I don't necessarily remember it, but you're right. That's not the scene I was thinking of. But that would be the scene that you would have something like that in, and it would explain why, Doctor Strange was even like, how are you able to move your body without you being in it? Like, even he was perplexed on how that was just automatically doing it. Like, his spider sense isn't necessarily a sense that he can react to himself. It's more of a physical thing that just happens. Like, his body senses danger and knows how to react to it without him. It's like breathing. Like, I don't know how to breathe. I just know that I breathe.
Like, I don't know how to make webs shoot out of my wrists, but it just happens.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the scene that I can definitely see them being able to visually represent that. And to me, it just would have been, astral projection. I'm not really paying attention to the ghosty things around him type thing, because in my mind, that's just astral projection.
Like I said, I could be wrong. If someone can correct me, I'll have to watch it again, which is probably going to happen. But it just, I saw that in my brain. I was like, oh shit, that's cool as fuck, because it looks very Steve Ditko-esque Spider-Man, because it was a head and shoulders shot of Tom outside the suit with his normal clothes on, which I thought was hilarious that he just wearing clothes outside his own body, which made no sense, but whatever.
But it wasn't like what he was wearing at the time. It's his normal clothes. It's not like he was being shot out and it was an astral projection of him wearing a Spider-Man suit. It was him just wearing clothes.
Yeah. And so you see it, and I was like, I wanted looking good. Do you see that? But I was like, like, what's happening right now? Like, what's going to go on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's the last thing I want to bring up, because I thought it was pretty cool. And again, I could be completely mistaken. It could have been like my tired brain just extrapolating visuals out of nowhere. But I could have swore I saw that, and I was like, bro, that's so cool that they did that. And I could be wrong. Maybe I didn't see it, but maybe I did. I don't know.
It would be something that I would definitely see them doing. It would be a detail that I would definitely see them throwing in there.
So that's all I have to talk about that. So we'll wrap it up. We'll do the whole intro outro thing where we go Comes naturally. We are.
Joe.
I have been Cody. This has been this episode. We were talking about the new Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man No Way Home. And as usual, you fuckers just came naturally.
Bye.